Prairie Yard and Garden is a production of the University of Minnesota Morris in cooperation with Pioneer Public Television. Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yakel Julien, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. Shalom Hill Farm, shalomhill.org. Diamond Willow Advanced Care Assisted Living, providing custom homes with smaller settings designed especially for high care needs.
My father-in-law, Ray, loved horses, especially his Appaloosa stallion named Bear. One day, Ray came home with a goat to be a companion for Bear. Well, that goat was all over the yard, much to the dismay of my mother-in-law. She really did not appreciate looking out the kitchen window and having the goat staring right back at her from on top of the picnic table. Well, her complaints fell on deaf ears until the day that Ray came out and the goat was standing on top of their new car. The goat found a new home the next day. I'm Mary Holm, and let's go kidding around on Prairie Yard and Garden. I really don't know much about goats, as that was not an animal we grew on our farm. They seem to have quite a reputation for being mischievous and eating everything in sight. Last spring, I attended a Garden Day seminar on how goats can be very beneficial to homeowners. It was so interesting that I just had to ask the presenter to do a show with me. I'm Mary Holm, host of Prairie Yard and Garden. And let's meet goat wrangler Tom Sonnenstall. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Mary.
Tell us about yourself and your background.
Well, I was born and raised in Wayzata, Minnesota, so not the combination you would expect for a goat farmer. But I attended the University of Minnesota, and I took college courses in agriculture to start for the first 2 or 3 years. I ended up going into law enforcement. And I had a career of 26 years in law enforcement, which I just retired from. As another chapter in my life, I decided to get back into the agriculture and the farm type atmosphere, and I got in with the goats and decided to do the goat grazing business.
How did you even get started in that?
Well, I have a property up in Nowthen, Minnesota, farm, and when I first moved to the farm, I have horses and things like that. But I acquired a couple of pygmy goats and as babies, and they just kind of took over the farm and ran around and played. And the more I got to dealing with these little pygmy goats, the more curious I became about goats in general.
Tom, when you have the goats in an area, how do they actually control the invasive plants?
Well, you know, when they come in, they'll target groups of species right away. It's kind of like, and here's how I relate it to. When you're late at night and you're hungry, or not late at night, but in the evening you're hungry, you go to the fridge, you're not gonna grab that potato or something from 3 days ago. You're gonna grab that pie that's sitting right there, right? First thing, you want the best thing first. So, and that's what the goats do. They'll come into the project and they will go to the buckthorn and they'll start chewing on that. And then when they're kind of done with that, they'll turn around and they'll look, and then there's some Canadian thistle, and they might go over and munch on that, and they love it with the little purple flowers, and they eat that. And then they'll turn around and they'll kind of mill around, and they might eat some garlic mustard or some of these other species. But eventually they're going to eat it all, but they just kind of rotate around, but it seems like they always go to what their favorite first, and that's the buckthorn.
Do you ever regraze the same area?
Sure, and so the concept with this grazing is a one and done is really not going to work that well. You need, what we're doing is we're not killing the plant like right outright. What we're doing is the goats are coming in, they're stripping all the leaves, they're defoliating the plant as high as they can go. And sometimes on their feet, they can get up to 6 or 7 feet. Now, if, let's say, a tree fell over, which I've seen on a project, a big elm tree fell down, it was 20 feet up in the air and laying in the crotch of another tree. I had goats crawl all the way up that tree and eat all of the browse as far as they could reach on either side of that as they walked up this tree. So literally goats in trees is true, it does happen. But they'll browse the buckthorn down and defoliate it. And what that's doing is stressing the root system on that plant. And they'll go through in the phase 1 and do that. And then, so what the buckthorn plant says, the roots say, hey, we need energy, we got to put some more leaves out and grow some more leaves. So the root's kicking up all this energy and it's growing out these leaves. And then I come back in a second time. 4 to 6 weeks later, I bring the goats back in and they do the same thing. They defoliate it and stress that plant again. So the roots on the buckthorn says, hey, we got to grow up some more leaves again. So that getting energy and it's building up these leaves, right? Then all of a sudden winter comes. And then the root system's like, are you kidding me? I got twice I've been stressed out this summer. Now I got to go through a winter. So come spring, the root systems are kind of dormant and died off. And so that's where you notice the biggest change is the following spring when these plants aren't coming back.
I would think that after things are grazed down, you could maybe even go in and overseed an area with desirable plants too. Do you ever do that?
Yeah, definitely. That's the concept that we also use. So as the goats are in defoliating and browsing all the plant material in there and getting rid of the unwanteds, the theory is you can't just have bare dirt because out of bare dirt grows weeds, right? So you need to put something in there that you want back in there, or the customer wants back in there. So, I recommend finding a seed base that they would like to put in there. And there are seed bases that you can put in the buckthorn groves and seed bases you can put out for wildflowers out in the open areas. And we do that before the goats go in, because the goats are sowing the seed with their hooves as they're in there eating the plants, and they're fertilizing it at the same time. So you have a whole eco-cycle going right in one process. That works out great.
Do you have any certain breed that you use for your goats?
Yeah, so primarily goat grazers, or browsing is what the goats do, use a variety of goats. In my herd I have Kikos, which is a New Zealand breed. I have South African Boers, and then I also have a mixture of Spanish cross with the Kiko and a Spanish cross with the Boer.
Are they as mischievous as I've heard?
Some are and some aren't.
So they have different personalities then?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone in the herd has their own personality, basically, sure. In each group, I try to put in a herd leader, and one of them is Pesto in this herd today that we're at. But every herd does have a definite leader, an alpha, if you want to call it that.
How do the goats work to control, especially the buckthorn?
Well, it's kind of funny, but when I put goats on a project or a property, one of the first targeted things they go for is the buckthorn plant. Buckthorn is not native to the United States. It actually was brought over from Europe back in the 30s, and it's a native plant for goats, Eurasian, European, that kind of part of the hemisphere where goats were predominantly raised. The U.S. is not a big goat raising country, and so when the buckthorn came over, the goats that were here kind of took liking to it. There's something about it they just love.
How do you figure how many goats you need for a project?
Well, I kind of size each individual project up based on the topography of the area and the density of the weeds and the browse that's in there. So if it's constant buckthorn, that takes a little less time than buckthorn mixed with grasses and other invasive weeds. And then I kind of size it up how many goats and how many days. A general rule is 20 to 25 goats can clear about an acre of buckthorn in a 1 week's time period.
Wow. So then how do you keep them in?
Well, I use electric mesh fencing, and I get it from Premier One. They're a company out of Iowa. They sell quite a bit of it. It's 9 strands down. It's horizontal. The strands horizontally are electric, and it contains the goats with a simple like horse fencer type electric. It's 42 inches tall, and it's also not very sturdy. But the key ingredient is not so much to keep the goats in, it's to keep predators and other things out. It keeps them away. The goats are all kind of trained on that. At my farm, I put up fence with all the goats, and I kind of train them to understand and respect it. So when I'm out on jobs, they don't even bother coming up to it or jumping or climbing on it at all. They'll see a fence tipped over. It literally has to be completely down, and there has to be something on the other side for them that they want. Otherwise, they basically want to stay in the area that they're in. So no, I don't have very many problems with that.
What do we call the males and the females? Okay, a baby is a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then is a male, is that a buck or a billy or?
Well, a lot of people call it slang as billy goats, but that's the proper is a buck and a doe. And then a buck that's been fixed so that it can't reproduce is called a wether.
Okay, so pretty much the same as sheep then.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband asked me, no, are goats ruminants? And I didn't know what the answer is.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they've got 4 stomachs. They will go through and they'll eat a cycle of food. They'll spend 2-3 hours grazing and munching and eating, and then they'll just go lay down like they're taking a break or a nap. But actually what they're doing is they're regurgitating the food they just ate and chewing it up again, and then going through the process. And once the one stomach chamber empties, they start over again and right back to work. So.
Okay, so it's kind of like a cow.
Yeah, exactly. But the nice thing about the goats, when they digest the food, and they're eating seeds in here, they're eating the tops of like the Canadian thistle, the flowering top, that's a seed base. Garlic mustard has a seed base. Even the buckthorn tops have its berries and whatnot, and the goats will eat all of that. They digest that through almost 100%. In fact, they just recently did a study on the buckthorn digestive system of a goat when they eat it, and they found no residue or seed base in the manure after, which means when the goats are on the property and they're eating the vegetation, they're leaving pretty much 100% organic fertilizer on your property. And the goat manure is loaded with nitrogen, phosphates, potassium, all the good stuff you want to put back in your soil with no seeds.
So the seeds aren't viable once they've traveled through their digestive system.
Right, they break them down to nothing.
Wow.
Unlike other animals, cows, horses, and their manure, a lot of seeds in their manure. So even the stuff you buy sometimes at the store that you use for your home garden fertilizer, you will find residue seeds in that.
How do you provide the water? Because when you're out and they are out in a pasture like this, how do you provide the water for them?
Well, I've got water tubs that hold about 6 gallons. I don't usually like to fill big stock tanks because I don't want water to get stagnant. The goats get a lot of moisture out of the grasses and the forbs and the foliage that they're eating on the projects. But I do have fresh water supply, and I'm lucky enough at some places where the customer has a water hydrant close to the fence. Then I'll run a hose to a water tank that has an automatic water shutoff valve in the water tank itself, the bowl. So as the goats drink it down, it'll refill back up. And so it's 100%, you don't have to worry about it. If I don't set that type of a system up, the homeowner will usually come out and just top off the water bucket once a day or once every couple of days, just monitor to see if it's getting low or not. But
That was one question that I had was, what is the homeowner responsibility when the goats are out on their property?
well, I don't know if you would call it responsibility or just the pleasure of having goats on your property, because a lot of the homeowners, I mean, yes, it is a responsibility to, you have live animals on your property. I'm ultimately responsible for their welfare, but I find the homeowners take so much care of these animals when they're on their property. They're pets, they're named, all of them have new names, and they're sad to see them go. So I feel real comfortable leaving the goats on the jobs because the homeowners are definitely going to make sure the water is filled, and they're going to keep an eye on where the goats are at and what they're doing and make sure the fence is okay. And if they do have a problem or any trouble like that, they call me. So
How often do you come out and check on the goats?
I'll come out maybe once a week. If it's a 2-week project or something like that, maybe once a week I'll check. Again, if the homeowner calls and says, hey, you know, something's up or I think they're done here or whatever, I'll come out and we'll take a look at it. But I'm pretty confident with the goats on the property. Once the fence is set, the electric is on, the homeowner has an idea of what's going on with the fencing and the watering. I just kind of leave it up to the goats to finish the job, and the homeowner can call me when they're ready. And I kind of can assume the time when they're going to be done.
When we had cattle on the farm, we always used to provide a salt blocker and a mineral lick. Do you have to do that with goats too?
Definitely. They know how to regulate their body, kind of. So if they're not getting certain minerals and nutrients out of the foliage that they're eating, I provide a loose mineral tube that's got magnesium, zinc, selenium is very important up here in the Midwest. We don't have that in a lot of our foliage or in the ground. And then I also have a mineral tub, which is a protein tub, so they can get extra proteins and stuff. And I also put in just a basic salt lick for their, their water and hydration. So.
How do you transport them from one place to the other, and do you have any trouble getting them into your transportation?
Yeah, no, not at all. I have basically a stock trailer, horse trailer, that I load them up into. At the farm, when I'm loading them to take them to a job, I just back the trailer in, I open the gate, a little coaxing with a little grain bucket doesn't hurt, and I'll load as many that will come into the trailer, and I'll usually kind of figure out how many I want to take to the job, and as soon as that many get in the trailer, I kind of shut the door, and whoever didn't make it, they're kind of upset because they got to stay there for the next trip, but then I take them to the project, unload the trailer, and they just come gangbusting out because they see all the foliage that they're about to eat, and they know that this is what they're doing. At the end of the projects, a lot of the foliage is done and the grasses are eaten, and they're at the point where the goats actually kind of know, like, hey, we're done here. And we need to go, when's the next job? And so when they see me pull in with the trailer, they know it's time to go.
Do you ever have to worry about predators getting in or trying to get into your goats?
The biggest, and it's not such a predatory thing more than a fencing issue, is deer. Deer will come up and they'll jump the fence or they'll test it because it's somewhere in the woods is a normal path where they used to come through, and now there's a fence in their way. So they come up and they'll test it, and sometimes they don't test it. They'll just try to jump over it, and maybe they catch a foot or something on it. Even though it's electric, they'll knock it down because, like I said, it's not a sturdy fence that way, and now they created a breach in the fence.
And then where do you keep them in the wintertime?
So the business is run with myself and my son Tyler, and he has a ranch up in a little town called Nimrod, Minnesota. So the winter farm is up there, and we've got a big barn up there. That's where the does are kept all winter. He is responsible for the kidding in the spring, the winter feeding, and all the care for the goats over the winter. So he's got the whole herd all winter long, whereas I've got the herd all spread out all summer long. So his responsibility in the winter is kind of an important role too, to keep this herd going, and the pregnant does, make sure they're staying healthy and whatnot for kidding.
Well, this has been so interesting. Thanks again so much for letting us come out.
You're welcome, thank you.
I have a question. What challenges are bees facing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually kind of complicated. We like questions that have simple answers, but it's really a combination of a few different factors. And honeybees get a lot of the attention, but a lot of these things are affecting all of our bee species. We have over 400 species of bees in Minnesota alone, and these are challenges that they're all facing. But generally, habitat is a big concern. So bees need good food and they need places to raise their babies, just like people and other animals. So they need flowers where they can collect food from and places to nest, and they need a lot of that in order to have a lot of bees. Another thing is pesticides being used on plants. Pesticides are important in the way that we grow plants today, but unfortunately they can sometimes they're designed to harm insects, and sometimes they can harm other insects that we weren't intending. And another big one is just diseases. And so diseases are normal, just humans, other animals all get sick, but combined with those other factors is when it becomes a really big issue, where when you're not getting proper food, you don't have places to live and raise your young, then those diseases can cause a lot of those issues.
Ask the Arboretum Experts has been brought to you by the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chanhassen, dedicated to enriching lives through the appreciation and knowledge of plants.
I'm with Katie Marchetto, who's with the University of Minnesota, and she is one of the people studying the effectiveness of using goats to control invasive weeds. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on site and share your insight and your knowledge with us. So first of all, what is an invasive weed?
Okay, invasive weeds often are from other places, so we'll say that they're non-native. They might originally be from Europe or Asia or another continent, and they've come to this continent mainly a lot of the time due to human movement, like shipping. There are a lot of ideas about why they just take off like mad once they get here, but they grow very prolifically, and they tend to sort of elbow out native species. So that's one of the reasons why they're a problem.
So what are you holding? What is this one? I assume this is one of our bad ones.
Yeah, you can find this in pretty much any woodlot in Minnesota. It's common buckthorn. So part of the problem with this one is that it just grows everywhere, shades out native plants. There are two other problems with it that are agricultural concerns. So one is there are all of these spots on it. Those are spots from an oat rust. It's a pathogen of the oats that farmers grow for us to eat. And it reproduces on buckthorns. Another concern is for soybean growers. So there's a very small insect called soybean aphid, and it's one of the biggest pests of soybean plants, and it overwinters on buckthorn. So buckthorn isn't just a problem because it elbows out natives, it also has all of these agricultural concerns associated with it.
How can a homeowner tell that they have buckthorn in their area?
Okay, so there are a couple of ways to tell that you're looking at a buckthorn. One way is it's got sort of these curving veins. The edges of the leaves are a little bit toothed. It has what botanists like to call sub-opposite branching, which means that often the leaves will be coming out from different places, kind of like this. Sometimes they'll be coming out more opposite like this. So if you see some leaves that are, kind of like this, they're sort of opposite but not, and then you see ones that are very alternate, then that's a really good indication you're dealing with buckthorn. They also, and this is one of the reasons why, in addition to the fact they're invasive, people don't like them, is they develop these spines on older branches. And goats love them. So we're studying the effects that the goats have on this invasive plant, and also the effects that the goats have on the native plant community as a whole. The person who's heading up that second part of the effort is Sarah Nelson. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about some common invasive plants in Minnesota.
Thank you so much for sharing your research with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Mary. I'm Sarah Nelson. I'm a grad student at the U of M, and I'm working also on the project looking at goats and buckthorn. And my part of the project is looking at the overall plant community and how the goats are affecting it. And so I would just like to tell you a little bit about some of the really common invasive species that we do see at a lot of these sites that people will probably recognize. This one right here is prickly to even hold. This is called Canada thistle, and it's one of our invasive thistles. And so this one is a problem because, as you can see, it's like really unpleasant, and also it forms really dense stands, so it crowds out a lot of other species.
Okay, and then you handed me some grasses
Sure.
too. What are these?
Okay, so we have two different grasses here, and you can tell they're different by the shape of the flower, just from a distance even. So the one in my right hand, this is called smooth brome, and this is a grass that's commonly been planted in agricultural areas, roadsides, and it's a problem because it does the same thing. It kind of crowds out other species. One way you can tell the bromes is that if you find a leaf, there's usually a little section of the leaf where there's a wrinkle that's in the shape of a W. And so we do have some native bromes, but if you see big fields of a grass like this, it's likely smooth brome. Another grass that's pretty problematic in Minnesota is this one. This is called reed canary grass. So this is another grass that was actually sort of an agricultural product that's been developed as an erosion control and feedstock, but it's so robust that it can do the same thing. It crowds out a lot of native species. You'll often see it in wet areas, and it'll just take over the whole area, and it's very difficult to remove. So this is another species that is really a big problem throughout Minnesota. This is called leafy spurge. This is another plant that you'll see in grassy areas, and it's in the Euphorbia family. So it's closely related to poinsettias. Oh, you got some of the sap on you. Okay, so you're gonna wanna wash that off. So yeah, a characteristic of this family is that if you break the stem or the leaf, you'll find a white sap coming out, and just like a Christmas poinsettia. We do have some native, they're called spurges. We have some of them, but a lot of the sort of straggly looking ones, these are invasive, and they cause problems in grassy areas as well.
When I grew up, we had a lot of that in North Dakota in our road ditches, and it was a real problem in the hay. And so now, do the goats eat all of these?
Well, they're not over here doing it right now, but we have seen them eating all of these, yes.
Okay, and so your research is going in after the goats have grazed an area and checking the effectiveness of how much they have controlled.
Right, exactly. So we want to see when they eat these plants, what is remaining? Is there other native species coming back in after the goats come through? What happens over time, exactly?
Well, thanks so much for showing us these weeds that we have in our yards. Now we know what they are and we can look for them, and also for talking about your research.
My pleasure, thanks so much.
Funding for Prairie Yard and Garden is provided in part by Heartland Motor Company, providing service for over 30 years in the heart of truck country. Heartland Motor Company, we have your best interest at heart. Farmers Mutual Telephone Company and Federated Telephone Cooperative, proud to be powering ASERA. Mark and Margaret Yakel Julien, in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. Shalom Hill Farm, shalomhill.org. Diamond Willow Advanced Care Assisted Living, providing custom homes with smaller settings designed especially for high care needs.